I don't know. I don't get feedback, but now
Yes,
I hope.
yes,
Yeah. If there's
yes.
anything, I can hear. So I don't know. I can't see my screen is full screen is gone, but I can hear. So if there's anything, feel free to talk and interrupt me when you have any question. So firstly, I'd like to thank Rajesh Kannan for his good initiative. Given that there is this corona, period, we just have to use webinars, and there's no other go now. So anyway, for whatever it is, it's a very good initiative. Even though we are all at home, I think we can still continue to work, because I'm working with my students. Even though my student is in Calcutta, over WhatsApp, over Skype, whatever, we keep doing it. So I guess all of us can do this. This is a good idea, and I'm very happy to be part of this idea. And today I'm going to talk about this immanental polynomials of Laplacians of trees. Yeah, and this poset called the GTS poset. Yeah. So let me just go to the next one. Yeah. So this is joint work with my ex-PhD student Mukesh Nagar. Yeah? He's the, so let me start with the theme here for this talk. So if you look at several optimization problems on trees, no. So you look at all trees with n vertices, several optimization problems. So when I say optimization, some quantity is being maximized or minimized, and it so happens that the extremal values either happen to be the path or the star, and sometimes it will be the max will be star, minimum will be path, or vice versa. Yeah. So can you see the mouse roll over some portions of the screen? Then it'll. Is that clear? Rajesh, for example, can you see the mouse roll over the screen, or is that not visible?
It's
No,
not
no,
visible.
It's not. What about now? Is something happening?
Yes,
Yeah.
I'm trying.
selecting something. Selecting the
Okay.
icon. Yeah.
Okay. So at least that if I need to highlight something, I'll try to put something there, not instead of just move the mouse. Okay. Thanks. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
So I'll give some examples of parameters, and we can see. So these are all well-known quantities from the literature. I can give you references. So if you look at the largest eigenvalue of the adjacency matrix of any tree, so the star has the maximum, path has the minimum. Yeah, this one can prove, and there are. I'll give you pointers where if you want to try to prove this, where is this theorem proved? I'll give you references. So the first example is largest eigenvalue of the adjacency matrix. Here again, the max and the minimum they happen to be the star and the path respectively. Yeah. Let me go on to the second example. So you fix an integer, a positive integer L, and you look at the number of closed walks of length L. So closed walks, by that you mean essentially you start at a vertex, take L steps and come back to the same vertex. Yeah. So you can retrace the same edge. So if you look at the first course on graph theory, they tell you the difference between walks, paths, trails. These are all standard things studied in graph theory. So I'm saying closed walks. So walks meaning you have to, from a vertex, you can go to a neighbor, you can go to this, and you can come back to the same vertex. That is, you don't have to have, if you have a path, the path is different from walk is different from trail, so on. Yeah. So this closed walks, if you look at the number of closed walks of fixed length L, this is related to the adjacency matrix and the trace of A power L essentially. Yeah. If you look at the number of closed walks of fixed length L, again, the maximum happens to be the star and the minimum happens to be the path. Yeah. And now if you just don't want closed walks, if you look at arbitrary walks, that is, I start at some vertex V, take L steps, go to some other vertex U. It need not be the same as the starting vertex. Closed walks meaning you come back to the same vertex. Arbitrary walks, you can start at some place, walk L steps, and wherever you reach. That's it. Only thing is you can only go from a vertex to a neighboring vertex. That's the only constraint. So if you look at count the number of walks of fixed length L, again, maximum is this, happens to be the star, and the minimum happens to be the path. So here I'm optimizing among all trees on n vertices. I'm not optimizing over arbitrary graphs. The problem is I'm restricting it to only trees with n vertices. And now whatever be your L, if you look at the number of walks of fixed length L, maximum happens to be the star, minimum happens to be the path. Yeah. And similarly, let me go on to the fourth property. If you look at the coefficients of the characteristic polynomial of the adjacency matrix. So what I call as adjacency characteristic polynomial. Here I had to, there is not enough space and I didn't want to go to a second line. So I just written coefficients of adjacency characteristic polynomial. By that I mean coefficients of the characteristic polynomial of the adjacency matrix. And now here the maximum happens to be the path, minimum happens to be the star. So you may ask, the characteristic polynomial is a polynomial. for every value of, so let's say it's a polynomial in the variable x, for every exponent x power r, there will be some coefficient. And now the path and the stars have the maximum for every r. That's the point here. When I say coefficients of adjacency characteristic polynomial, that is, you look at the characteristic polynomial of the any tree, and as the tree varies, we look at which tree has maximum, let's say coefficient of x power r. Fix an r. What is the coefficient of x power r? That will be a, so in fact you have to take the absolute value here. I have not, there's one thing that I'm fudging here because I don't have space. We'll study this more in detail in the fifth point. We will study in detail for the Laplacian characteristic polynomial. So if you look at the adjacency matrix of the tree and you look at the characteristic polynomial and you fix any x power r, that is, you fix an r. So once you fix the exponent r, the coefficient of x power r is going to be some natural number that up to sign. So the star path is the maximum, star is the minimum. This is also proved. Yeah. And similarly, here now instead of considering the adjacency matrix of a tree, consider the Laplacian matrix of a tree. You look at the characteristic polynomial, and then if you look at the coefficients, they again seem to exhibit some monotonicity. That is, there is some path is the maximum, star is the minimum. Yeah. So, and if you look at, there's this person called Sikwari. It's Hungarian, so I don't know if I'm saying it wrong, but if he's there, I can apologize. Maybe it is Chikwari. One person told me it's Chikwari. I don't know if it's Sikwari or Chikwari, but yeah, this person Chikwari, he has proved, he has given a list of about 15. Now it's even more. Many parameters like this. So here we have 5 on this slide. There are about 15, yeah, which exhibit similar behavior. Similar meaning max will be one of star and path, and once max is star or path, minimum will be the other thing, other extreme. Yeah. So now this our several such examples exist. As I've said, 15 such parameters. We've just seen 5. So now why is this happening here? That's the first thing. What is special about the star and the path? So star and the path seem to be the extremal values, either maximum or minimum. But why so? Why is some other tree not the minimum or the maximum? So there may be that's one is an interesting property to see why stars and paths occur, but they seem to occur. So firstly, if you look at this, all these properties have nothing to do with the labeling of the vertex set of the tree. Yeah. If you look at all the properties, largest eigenvalues, all these properties, characteristic polynomial, they're all independent of the labels. Even here, number of closed walks, So essentially, you don't need to consider labeled objects here. Yeah? Labeled trees are not relevant. Unlabeled trees are good enough for us. Okay, so that is the first point. And now this guy Shikwari, he defined a poset that we'll call as generalized tree shift, GTSN, on the set of unlabeled trees. And he showed that these properties, among the properties, meaning if you look at these, all of them are monotonic on the poset. That is, they'll either, monotonic meaning either all increasing or all decreasing. Yeah. So let's see what this poset is. Yeah. So I'll give you an example. If you look at the set of all trees of size 6, that is, they're having 6 vertices. Here is, so since I said the labeling is irrelevant, if you look at this poset, so here, how do I highlight? Only the trees comes. Okay, I can't highlight. Okay, doesn't matter. Okay, so if you look at this poset, if you look at unlabeled trees of order 6, that is with 6 vertices, there are actually 6 of them. Yeah, up to isomorphism. That these are the 6, and now you can put a partial order structure on them. And now it so happens that many of these properties have monotonicity property along the poset. That is, if let's say the maximum is at the bottom, which is the path, then maximum is here, so it keeps decreasing along every edge of the Hasse diagram. This property value keeps decreasing. It is monotonically decreasing. So of course, if it's monotonic, if you prove that there is such a poset, and that the minimum element is the path, the maximum element is the star, and you prove that some property is monotonic along this poset, then of course it follows that the star and the path, which are so the path is the minimal element of the poset, star is the maximum element of the poset, and so if some property is monotonic, then of course you get maximum minimum being the star and the path respectively. And further you get more refined things. That is, instead of saying everything is between whatever the path and whatever is the star, here you have a monotonic property. For example, you can say some things. For example, this tree, I'll call this, no, I've not labeled the tree. So let's say this is the path, the one on the left, bottom left. So let's say this is the bottom, the path tree I'll call the bottom, star tree I'll call the top, and then these, so there are 4 trees in other than that. So this I'll call as bottom left, bottom right, top left, top right. So this is for the remaining 4. So there are some other comparisons. You see bottom left and top left, there is actually, if you prove monotonicity along the poset, then there is something you can say about trees in between, which are not necessarily the star and the path as well. So you get more detailed information. Okay, so let me define this poset. So here, if you look at, take a tree. So this labeling 1 to k is just to help us. The order is on unlabeled trees. The label is not relevant. This is just to help us understand the poset. So this tree that we have on the left, I am saying is less than the tree that is there on the right. And why so? So here, when do you say something is less than this? So you take 2 vertices, 1 and k on this. So consider the picture on the left. Yeah.
No, excuse me.
Yeah.
What is your monotonicity property?
No, it depends on the property. If you say eigenvalues of or characteristic polynomial, the coefficient of the characteristic polynomial, so on, there will be some property which is monotonic along this poset. So that property, there were 15 of them. All 15 are monotonic on this poset. Actually, what I said is I only showed that maximum and minimum. But if you look at largest eigenvalue of the adjacency matrix, that is monotonic on this poset. So whatever property you take, it turns out to be monotonic on this poset. So maximum, minimum, minimum, maximum, that's the only idea. Either it decreases along the poset or increases along the poset.
Oh, okay.
Is it clear?
Okay. Yes.
Yeah.
Clear.
Okay. So let me consider this, let me define the poset. So here we're going from the tree on the left to the tree on the right. So how do you do it? You have to pick 2 vertices, 1 and k, in the tree on the left. The only extra property we require is that all intermediate vertices on the path from 1 to k, because in a tree there's a unique path from between any 2 vertices. So there are 2 special vertices, 1 and k. So 1, maybe I can, now 1 and k. At least were these highlighted? 1 and k, are they getting highlighted?
Yes.
1, is it getting highlighted at the moment?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
1 and k. Yeah. So these are special. The only condition required is that if you look at the path between 1 and k in the tree, all the intermediate vertices, if there are any, they should have degree 2. In that case, what do we do? So here, look at all the neighbors of k. So k is the special vertex. So k has there is this path, comprising of only degree 2 vertices between k and 1, and there are some other neighbors. So all the other neighbors of k, except on those lying on this path, all of them get detached from k and get connected to 1. That's how you get the figure on the right. So let me repeat. If you look at this figure on the left, there are some restrictions. You can't take arbitrary, because the path from 1 to k should have only degree 2 vertices. Now k has several vertices adjacent to the vertex k. So there are several edges incident on vertex k. One, of course, is this having the path from 1 to k, and there are remaining others. All the others, they get their connection. So if you look at this edge from k to some other vertex here, other than on this path, they all get broken. That is, they change their endpoint from k to 1. Is this clear? Here. So okay, maybe this picture, see this here, this thing is attached to 1 here. Maybe this should have been attached to this vertex here. There's a slight, the picture is not as good as it should have been. I'll correct this and send this to Rajesh by the time by slides. By tonight I'll send the slides with this. So if you look at this, k is connected to this. There's a V on the top. It should have been connected to the center of the V, because the 1 here is connected to the center of the V in the picture on the right. You understand? There is a slight, I'm not happy with this. I made this long back. There is this slight, inaccuracy. Is this okay? Is this definition okay? How you go from one tree to another tree on this poset? I'm trying to explain, and I'll give you an example of this operation, and try to go from this tree here. No, not the bottom left to the bottom. Bottom left to top left, and bottom left to top right. Both I will try to explain using this. Is this clear, or should I spend more time? Because these are the important. It's important that the definition of the poset be clear. So let me repeat once more. You take a tree and take 2 vertices, 1 and k. They are special vertices, k and 1. What is the why are they special? They are special because you can do this operation on these two vertices and get to a tree which is higher up on the poset. Okay, so you can start with some tree here, pick two vertices 1 and k somehow with some special properties, yeah, and then do some operation with respect to these special vertices, and once you do the operation, the tree you get will be above this. That's the idea. That's how we are going to define this poset, yeah, this Chickwari's poset. And so 1 and k are special vertices. What is special about them? They can be chosen in a tree if the intermediate vertices on the path from 1 to k comprise only of degree 2 vertices. In that case, what do? K has some number of edges incident on it, except those on this path 1 to k. See, that path 1 to k is now going to come here as it is, but the other edges, now they are, instead of being adjacent to k, they'll get adjacent to 1. Is that clear? So let me give you one example. So if you look at this, this is portion of this tree of the poset here. So if you look at this poset, there is this bottom left, top left, and top right. Is this notation clear? Bottom left, top left, and top right. So if you omit the path and the star tree, there are 4 trees. So I'll call it bottom for these two. The 2 elements at the bottom, I'll call it bottom. 2 elements at the top, I'll call it top. And then left and right. So that bottom left, bottom right, so on. So I'll show how this, illustrate how this operation gives you these trees from the bottom left to the top left and bottom left to the top right. Yeah? Is this okay? Are people with me?
Yes.
Okay, so this pink color, so if you look at the bottom left tree, which is, so there is this essentially a path with 2 leaves adjacent to it. Yeah, there are these 2, and then here so if you try to remember these 3 pictures, bottom left, top left, and top right, then let me go on to this. So I'm again just copying bottom left, top right. So there is this color which tells you which are the vertices 1 and k. So this pink color edge, from bottom left to top left, tells you that these pink vertices 1 and k are chosen. So in this case, what happens? So the path 1 to k is retained as it is, but all edges incident to k other than those on the path, they get broken from k and they get attached to 1. So that's why you get the picture on the top. Is it clear? Let me repeat once more. So you look at this tree, which is the bottom left tree, and you look at these pink vertices 1 and k, and in this case, even though there is no vertex in between, that is still okay. See, all intermediate vertices have degree 2. That's correct for the pink vertices 1, this one, and this k. Yeah, these 2 vertices. Is it coming highlighted? This pink one and this pink k. These 2 vertices, they have this special property. That is, intermediate vertices have degree 2. So then what can you do? You can connect everything which is adjacent to k, not on the path. Break that connection to k and attach it to 1. That's what this operation tells you to above. Yeah. So that means you will get this tree above at the top left. Is this clear?
Sir, I have a question.
Yeah. Yes, please.
Sir, these 2 vertices can be any vertices in the
anywhere on the tree. Yeah.
Okay.
Anywhere on the tree. Yeah.
Krishnan, I have Kamal here from Nicer.
Hi, Kamal.
Sir, when you are fixing, suppose you from the bottom tree you fixed 1 and k.
Yeah.
Then you move upward. Your 1k will be that's fixed 1 and k, or you will change it.
No. For a fixed choice of 1 and k, you will get 1 tree above. If you take another 1 and k, different 1 and k, you may get a different tree. So this pink thing, is illustrating what you have from the bottom left to top left. I will illustrate for the same tree, that is the same bottom left tree. I will illustrate on a different pair 1k, which is in blue here, not pink, and that will go to the top right. So if you look at this, this thing,
Yeah.
bottom left is the bottom left. I chose some pair 1, k, and I went to the top left. Bottom left, I chose some other pair 1k, and I went to the top right. That is also possible.
Okay.
Here also, even if you look at the path, there are 2 things we can. So that's what I want to illustrate. Here, if you look at the bottom left tree, by choosing this pink vertices 1 and pink k.
Yes.
Only thing is this, only extra condition required is that all intermediate vertices on the path from 1 to k should have degree 2. That's the only condition.
Each step you can change your 1 and k maybe if required.
Yeah. That's what. The
Okay.
1 and k. You start with a tree. There may be several pairs.
Okay.
For all such pairs, you apply the operation and you'll get another tree.
Okay.
If it's a different tree, sometimes it will be isomorphic, so you can't
Yeah.
do anything. All non-isomorphic things, I'll say here is so that will give me one tree above this current tree that I'm starting out with.
Okay.
Is that clear? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. If there are any more questions, yeah, please feel free to stop me. Yeah, because these are it's important that the basics be covered. Yeah.
Question.
Yeah.
So in the top left tree.
Top left. Yeah.
Yeah. So the vertices 1 and k are the two rightmost vertices on the path, right? Just check.
No, 1 and k are the two rightmost vertices on the path. Yes.
So
Yes.
they have okay. Yeah.
Correct. The vertex 1 had this one more. Yeah. Correct. So this leaf which was attached to the pink k now gets attached to vertex 1.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. So that means k has now become a leaf. Is that okay? Is that what you want to say?
Yeah.
K has now become a leaf.
Yeah.
In the top left tree. 1 is this, k is this.
So now,
And now
these two vertices are not vertically aligned, right? That's what I wanted to make sure.
Not vertically aligned. No. They're not vertically aligned. No, if they're vertically aligned, then the left two endpoints will also have to be vertically aligned. That will cause you a problem. They're here. The bottom left, there is a path of length 4. Is it 1, 2, 3, 4? 4 edges. Here, there's only 3. So that will go. I'm not vertically aligning it. Yeah, you're right. There's no vertical alignment. So is this clear? If you go from bottom left to top left. And likewise, now you start with the bottom left tree, you look at this blue vertex 1 and the blue vertex k. And now you can check that the intermediate vertices all have degree 2. So all the neighbors of k which are not on this special path, 1 to k path, they get attached to vertex 1. So now you get 1 extra. So this leaf that is attached to the vertex, the blue k, gets attached to blue 1. The last leaf, the rightmost leaf. Is that clear? That's why you get this other tree. Now I'm trying to explain this relation between the bottom left tree of this and the bottom left and the top right. So I'll have to start with the tree and I'll have to tell you which two vertices. Once I tell you the two vertices, then it's clear. The procedure is clear. So you look at the vertex 1, look at the vertex k. 1 and k are important. 1 and k, what happens? All neighbors of k not on the path. They get broken from k and they get attached to 1. That's it. Is it clear? So now the leaf at the rightmost leaf on the bottom left picture, that will get attached to 1 now. The blue one, yeah, because this is the blue edge. This color coding is just to help you, to understand where you're going. So this pink 1k will take you along the pink edge to the top left. This blue 1k will take you from the bottom left to the top right. The blue is just for ease of understanding. That's it. Because I don't know with this webinar, that's the only thing, because I'm not able to move. That is, the cursor that I'm moving is not being displayed. So that's one thing I want to make sure that people are with me on this page. Is this part clear?
Yes.
Yeah. So you're starting with so if you in fact know, if you can people can try to do this as an exercise. I'm back to this GTS POSET picture. If you look at the path, somehow there are two trees above it. Which two? I mean, which 1 and k did I choose to go to the bottom left? Which 1 and k did I choose to go to the bottom right? You can think about it. After likewise, I have explained only the bottom left to top left and bottom left to top right. Yeah. So other things one can check. You can check this. So there are a few interesting properties about this POSET. So one is that it's graded in the sense, graded meaning all trees which have some fixed number of leaves, they will all be at the same level. Yeah. So the path which has 2 leaves is at the bottom. So the bottommost tree is the tree which has minimum number of leaves. Every tree has at least 2 leaves. This is also a standard fact that we prove in a graph theory course. So the bottommost tree has 2 leaves, which is the path. So the trees which have 3 leaves, they'll all be there above. Yeah. So these trees all have 4 leaves. They are all just one layer above. Yeah. So actually you have a multi-storied building. Each story is just going to be those trees which have k leaves. So of course the bottom layer you could have either started with 0 or 1, but sadly here the minimum number of leaves is 2. So the bottommost layer is the set of all trees which have 2 leaves. The first floor, so this is the ground floor, so to speak. The bottommost layer meaning the ground floor consists of all those trees which have 2 leaves. First floor consists of all those trees which have 3 leaves. Second floor is 4 leaves, so on. Yeah, so we keep going up. So of course, if you look at the tree which has maximum number of leaves, that turns out to be the star. Yeah. So you can check. So starting with level 2, I mean, if number of leaves is 2, 3 extra up to n minus 1. That's how it goes. So this is what Sequary proves. I'm not going to need that. So I'm not considering properties of this poset. Yeah. Okay. So the main lemma which we need is that every tree with n vertices other than the path lies above some tree T prime on this GTS. So, and the star is the maximal element. Yeah. And so what this means is there is this poset has one component. That is, you might see there are several posets that were earlier put to try to unify this. See, these properties have been studied long back for a long time. Whereas this poset is reasonably recent. It is 2009 and then 14, I think. Yeah, there are 2 papers Sequary has written. You can check the references, but this is well into the last decade. So there were several attempts made to unify this thing. Only thing is now you have a poset in which all trees occur, and the path is the minimum, star is the maximum. That's the point. Yeah. Every tree other than the path lies above some other tree T prime on GTSN. Yeah. So, and the star is the maximal element, path is the minimal element. So this tree has only one component. See, if it has several components, then even if you prove monotonicity, if you want to find maximum or minimum, you'll have to take maximum over the number of components. You know, that's a slight problem. Yeah. So that is minimum. That doesn't happen in this case. That's the point. So is this lemma clear? You know what this lemma wants to prove? That there is this set of trees. All trees will appear. So that's what it says. You take any tree on n vertices that is going to appear on this poset, this connected poset. That is, there is this minimum element is the path, maximum is the star. Every other tree will appear somewhere. In fact, where will it appear? That also you can say, depending on the number of leaves it has. It will appear at that height. Yeah. So this is the important theorem that we will use this. So now in this talk, I'm going to generalize one of these results. So coefficient of the Laplacian characteristic polynomial. So I'm going to change Laplacian to Q Laplacian. I'll define them, and I'm going to change characteristic to immanental polynomials. Yeah. So in this talk, I'm going to consider one of the parameters here. And again, you know, the star and the path will be the maximum and the minimum. And I'll change. Only thing is I'm going to make Laplacian into Q Laplacian. I'm going to make characteristic into immanental polynomial. Okay. So I'll tell you what these two things are. Yeah. So let me go on to immanents. So is this clear? This is the outline of what I want to do. So there is some background that I've defined. How to go? There is this poset. So if you've not seen this poset, this is kind of interesting poset. And further, you know, one can study more properties. I have some questions lined up later. Yeah, we'll see. And now I want to generalize one of the properties here, which is Laplacian characteristic polynomial coefficients. I'm going to change Laplacian to Q Laplacian, and I'm going to change characteristic polynomial to immanental polynomial. Okay. So let me go on to definition of the immanents. So there is this more general definition than determinants. So I'll use the definition of determinants to motivate definition of immanents. So as usual, this Sn is the symmetric group and containing all permutations. In fact, n factorial elements are there. And now if you take any function from permutations to Z, yeah. So it is important that this n and this n cross n matrix, the n's are the same. So you take any n cross n matrix Aij, and you take any function f from Sn to Z. Yeah. So only thing I want is the matrix A should have entries from a commutative ring, because for this this product to be defined, the order shouldn't be relevant. Yeah. So here you can define. So if you look at the definition, one of the definition of the determinant due to Laplace, which says here instead of f of sigma you put sine of sigma. That you would have studied in your course on linear algebra, maybe even the first course. Yeah. So you take, instead of f of sigma, if you put sine of sigma, sum over all sigma in your permutation Sn, sine of sigma into product of this diagonal product, that will be actually determinant of the matrix A that we have seen. So now I am going to change this, going to put something more general here than just sine of sigma. So what am I going to put? I am going to put some arbitrary function f from Sn to Z. Z because, you know, usually my matrix A will have integer values. That's why I chose Z. Yeah. And it so happens that the characters that we study, they will all be integral. Yeah? So is this clear? This definition. So I have a definition of determinant of A with respect to a function f, det AF. Is this definition clear? The second definition, definition 2. Can I go on to higher things? The next slide.
Yes.
Yeah. If there are any questions you ask me, yeah, people, whoever, any questions you ask me, don't worry about, no, because these definitions, I don't know if you studied well and good. If you don't know, just don't worry. Here, instead of putting sine of sigma, I'm just going to put an arbitrary function f from Sn to Z. That's it. And I'm going to study a determinant with respect to that function f. That function f is going to be the subscript here. Yeah, determinant sub f of a. Yeah, that's what we're going to study. Okay. So now, if you do some amount of representation theory of the symmetric groups over C, it will give you several such functions. Yeah. So you get such functions for free. So functions like this. Anyway, you can get several functions from Sn to Z. Rep theory with this representation theory gives you several such functions. So here I will give a brief thing on representation, whatever I need. You don't need to know any representation theory for this, except the fact that some functions are coming out of the theory generally. Yeah, that's the only fact that I will use. I'm not going to use any rep theory fact in this talk. In fact, I'll just summarize briefly whatever we have here. So it gives us P of n many. So P of n is the number of partitions of the number n. So if you let's say look at the number 3, how many partitions does the number 3 have? It will have 3, 2, 1 and 1, 1, 1. So there are 3 partitions. P4 will be 5 because if you look at 4, P4 will be 4, that is one choice, 3, 1 is the second choice, 2, 1, 1 is the third choice, 2, 2 is the fourth choice, 1, 1, 1, 1 is a fifth choice. So there are many such functions that you get. The number of such functions you get will be a function of n indeed by this representation theory, and then it will give us P of n many such functions. So they are indexed by partitions. So depending in this theory, if you look at the partition 1 power n, that is again a partition of the number n. So 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, that will give you sine. Yeah. So you will get the determinant. And if you look at the partition n, just having one part equal to n, then you will get all ones, which is what is called as a permanent. So just like you have, if f sigma happen to be the sine, you will get the determinant. If it happens to be f sigma happens to be 1 for all sigma, you will get the permanent, right? So permanent, that's also well studied, right? The well-known relative of determinant. So that also you get. So these two special cases, permanent and determinant, are special cases of immanence. Corresponding to this partition 1 power n, you get determinant. Corresponding to partition n, you get permanent. And you get many more. In fact, you get partition of n that many immanents. Yeah. So definitely, what you have for immanents is a generalization of what you have for determinants. Because one of the immanents is a determinant, one of the immanents is a permanent, and you get several more. Yeah. Okay. So we will consider functions f that arise as characters of irreducible representation. So that is that's how is this function f going to come? It is a character of an irreducible representation. How many irreducible representations are there? That is equal to partition of n. These are all standard facts in course on representation theory. I can give you the next or a slide very shortly is going to have some books on rep theory and some basic material if you want to read. Where do you read this? In case you want, I'll give you some reference books. Yeah, and then with respect to such a function f, determinant f is called an immanent. Yeah, so in general, if you take an arbitrary function, it's called a generalized matrix function. If that f happens to arise from as a character of an irreducible representation, then it's called an immanent. Yeah, that's just terminology. So is this clear? You start with any function f. Arbitrary, if you start, you'll get an n cross n matrix, you'll get a generalized matrix function. Instead, now if you start with a irreducible character of Sn and any n cross n matrix, you will get what is called an immanent of the matrix A. Yeah, is that clear?
Sir, one question.
Yeah.
Sir, so we can take any conjugate function,
Conjugate meaning, how do you define?
like for any
So I have f from
sigma
Sn
and
to
tau.
yeah.
Yeah, for any sigma and tau in Sn, I have f of sigma equals to f of tau sigma tau inverse,
F prime sigma, you're saying you're going to define from a given f, you're going to define f prime.
which satisfy the property for any sigma and tau in Sn.
Oh yeah.
F.
So consider those f which satisfy the property that they are constant on a conjugacy class. That's what you're saying?
Yeah.
Of course, yeah. All irreducible characters satisfy that property, and we will
Yes.
see that property is required for this lack of labelingness. That we will see. Yeah,
Okay.
correct. Yeah. So if you look at this, yeah. So in f is the sine function. F pi is sine of pi for all pi in Sn. You get the usual determinant, as I've said, no. And when f is the identity function of the all ones function, defined as f pi equal to 1 for all pi, determinant of the identity, with respect to that identity function, that will be the permanent. And these are irreducible characters, and you get many more. So you get p of n many characters. So the notation, standard notation to say that lambda is a partition of n is this, lambda, this this notation, lambda slash v dash is the LaTeX command. So lambda partition of n. So you have, if you take a partition lambda of n, there is a function chi lambda from Sn to Z. That's all I want to know. Yeah, that's the only background that is required. So how do you get this thing? We don't need it actually. Representation theory will give us such functions. We don't need it actually. Yeah, in fact they turn out to be, as this person just before told me, it turns out to be a class function that is, it is constant on conjugacy classes. So here is if you look at the character table of S4 will have 5 irreducible characters. Why? Because we just saw that there will be 5 partitions of the number 4, right? 4 itself, that's 1. 3 1 is the second. 2 2 is the third. 2 1 1 is the fourth, and 1 1 1 1 is the fifth. So there are 5. That's why there are 5 rows here. So the trivial and the sign are marked separately. And now here, if you look at the columns, there are 5 columns because there are 5 conjugacy classes. So this representation theory, if you study, it turns out that the number of irreducibles is equal to the number of conjugacy classes, and the character is constant on any conjugacy class. So when I say 1 2, you look at the conjugacy, all those permutations which are cycle type 2 1 1 1 1, so on. Okay. So here is the character. This is just this, data that you can get from any book, standard book on representation theory. So here is this promised 2 books. So in this era of PDF books and all, these books are all, I guess you can get them. Your library might be having them, and definitely both of these are classic books. So this book on the right, Representations and Characters of Groups, this is a standard first. It's a very basic book, highly recommended. And this book by Meris on multilinear algebra is also highly recommended. And as you see, even though I'm advertising for this book, I am not an author or a co-author. So this is genuine appreciation and born out of just studying and enjoying the subject rather than commercial value. Yeah, has no commercial value. But these 2 books are really good. I strongly recommend it for those who are interested. Okay. So as was pointed out, see, we look at matrices that arise from graphs. So we had seen that the labeling of the graph is actually irrelevant, though it is relevant for getting the entries. If you want to choose this 1 to 8th entry, it is important to know which vertex is labeled 1, which vertex is labeled 2. Yeah. So here is and you want this determinant to be independent of the label and so on. So if you take arbitrary generalized functions, here f from Sn to Z. So if f has certain properties, then it is independent of the labeling. Otherwise, it depends on the labeling. That's the worry. Yeah. So let's see. When is it independent of the labeling? It is independent if precisely whatever this comment was made before. F of tau is f of sigma inverse tau sigma. That is, you take a permutation tau, you take a conjugate of tau in Sn. That means you multiply on the left by sigma inverse, on the right by sigma. That will give you some other permutation. If f of tau is equal to f of this for all sigma and tau, then it so happens the determinant f of a is equal to determinant f of p sigma inverse a p sigma. So, and this, if you can check this p sigma a inverse, p sigma is actually, this is, if a is the matrix that you obtain with respect to the labeling. So here is if you change the labeling using the permutation sigma, this will be the new matrix. P sigma inverse a p sigma will be the matrix that you obtain when you change the labeling with respect to sigma. Is it clear? Let me say this again. You take a matrix, you start with a graph, you label it somehow, and then you change the labeling by applying a permutation sigma. Okay. So maybe I can, is there okay, I don't need, otherwise I have to wave my hands. So maybe you can just see this slide. So you start with a graph and then get maybe the adjacency matrix or the Laplacian matrix, so on. So there is a labeling, and that gives rise to the adjacency matrix A. And now you change your labels using the permutation sigma. So now the vertex I, if there was a vertex labeled I, now it will get the vertex sigma of I. So I'm just going to permute the vertices and then get to another differently labeled graph. So that differently labeled graph will have an adjacency matrix. That adjacency matrix will be p sigma inverse a p sigma. And now this determinant with respect to the function f, these two will be the same if this condition is true. Yeah. So there is a quick proof given, but you can just see this proof. And here I don't know why this LaTeX troubled me. Earlier it gave me this f as a proper subscript here. Somehow now it moved this f below. So if anybody knows, there are some tech gurus on this who are in the audience. If they can help me, it will be good, because just this one slide is causing me. This is just a simple double sign. You change the order of the summation and you'll get it different. That's it. So this proof is easy. I won't go to it. Very, very easy. You can check this. Yeah. Okay. So now, similar to the characteristic polynomial, I will define the immanential polynomial. So characteristic polynomial was determinant of xi minus m. Maybe I could have put a bracket here. It's not determinant of xi minus m. Yeah, determinant of xi minus m. Yeah, so you take a matrix M, you look at xi minus m. Here x is a variable, and you look at determinant of that. That will give you the characteristic polynomial. That's a definition. Now, instead, if you want the immanental polynomial of m indexed by the partition lambda, you just consider the immanent of xi minus m. Is it clear? That's it. Just mimicking whatever we know for characteristic polynomial. Right from the definition, we are mimicking whatever we know for the characteristic polynomial to this new definition where there is this extra function f from Sn to Z. Not arbitrary functions, class functions. So if you look at this, this tells you that class functions are important. Theorem 3 tells you that class functions are important. And this rep theory gives you class functions only. Yeah, that's why we are concentrating on functions which arise from representation theory. So now based on that function and a matrix M, you get this determinant with respect to lambda, xi minus m, the immanental polynomial of m, yeah, indexed by lambda. Is this definition clear? Okay. Now, so this essentially concludes whatever I wanted to say about immanental polynomials. Now the brief background that I wanted to say about immanental polynomials. So if you look at this, the aim of the talk was to change here, characteristic had to be changed to immanental, Laplacian had to be changed to Q Laplacian. So now I finished this thing. Characteristic I have now changed to immanental. Is this now clear? Because characteristic is very clear. We've studied it from our first course in linear algebra. Immanental, you just need an extra parameter lambda, immanent indexed by some partition lambda of n. Once you fix the n, you can look at n cross n matrices, and you have to fix a lambda which is a partition of the number n. Then you get an immanental character. When you get a character, a irreducible character indexed by lambda, and hence a immanent indexed by lambda. Is that clear? Okay. So here this determinant lambda of xi minus m, here it is indexed by the lambda, this lambda, which is a partition of the number n. Yeah. Is this clear? So I'll go on to the next thing, which is the Q analog of the Laplacian of a graph, which is a slightly different version of the Laplacian. So all of us know that the matrix D minus A is the Laplacian of any graph G. Yeah. L equal to D minus A, it's positive semi-definite, a very good matrix, very well studied, amazing properties it has. So you can study algebraic properties of L and get some infer some graph theoretic properties of G. That's why we study this matrix L. Yeah. And now for a variable Q, okay, we define another matrix here. This definition looks kind of complicated, but I'll come to it in a minute. What is the idea? See, this matrix L has integer entries. Yeah. This matrix LQ has entries in the polynomial in the variable Q. So every entry, ijth entry of this matrix LQ, that's why it's called Q, is a polynomial in the variable Q. It would have been good to have a polynomial in the variable X, but somehow, this Q, the notion Q analog is there to stay. You can't do anything about it. So I'm not going to go against convention. I will just say, take a variable Q. I could have said take a variable X, but somehow, take a variable Q, and for the characteristic polynomial, I'll use a variable X. Yeah. So they take a variable Q, define this matrix I plus Q squared D minus I minus QA. Yeah. So this is now called the Q analog of the Laplacian, because if you put Q equal to 1, what do you get? So you put Q equal to 1, you will get I plus D minus I minus A, which is the same as D minus A. Yeah. So when Q equal to 1, the Q analog turns out to be the Laplacian, and when Q is not equal to 1, you get some interesting things. So why do we study this? So this matrix, the Q analog of the Laplacian, in my opinion, is as amazing a matrix as the Laplacian. Yeah. So I'll give you two connections. So there are these zeta functions. So there is Ihara-Selberg zeta function. There is one more Bartholdi zeta function. Quite a few zeta functions are associated with graphs, and many of them use the Q analog. Yeah. Amazing actually. Yeah. And now there is also this inverse of Q distance matrices, Q exponential distance matrix in particular. In fact, that's given here, and maybe it will come down below. Yeah? Bapat, Lal, and Pati showed that the Q analog of the Laplacian is the inverse of the Q exponential distance matrix. Up to there is a scalar factor. Yeah? So, and when Q equal to 1, of course, you get the Q analog of the Laplacian. LQ will be equal to L when Q equal to 1. But when Q is not equal to 1, you might get it's some other matrix. If you put Q equal to half in this, you will get some other matrix, something. The entries will be real numbers. What about, so what can you infer from other values of 2? See, because even from the matrix L, we are able to infer properties of G. So maybe from the matrix LQ for R. So that is essentially you're saying from the matrix LQ for Q equal to 1, you're able to infer properties of G. So maybe for the matrix LQ, for different values of Q, you can infer more properties of G. That's the hope. That's why we study this. Yeah, because we know that there is already some light at the end of the tunnel. We know that there is something to back us up, because when Q equal to 1, we know the Laplacian, the LQ will be equal to the Laplacian L. So something we already know some results about Laplacian, we try to generalize it to LQ. That's the idea here. Yeah. So at least for trees in this talk, for trees we're interested in seeing if results on L are all true for LQ, at least for some Q. Yeah, that's the idea. So so here is a theorem. In case if LQ is the Q Laplacian of the tree T, then determinant LQ is actually 1 minus Q square. It doesn't even depend on N. That's a beautiful theorem. So usually there are some theorems wherein the determinant value will depend on N. Here the only thing you require is that take a tree. It's a tree on N vertices. The N itself is irrelevant. Determinant of LQ is 1 minus Q square, and LQ is positive semi-definite if and only if Q is in the closed interval minus 1 1. Yeah. So these are properties in Bapat, Lal and Pathi. So these are the things. So the poset. So as I've said, I need 3 ingredients to state the results. So one is this poset GTS, which I've already defined. Second is this Q Laplacian, which we just saw, and third is immanential polynomials indexed by lambda. Yeah. So with this we can state some immanential polynomials results, so on, and we'll see. A little more results are known before I state my results. I'm not going to prove it. And I'll. How much time do I have, Rajesh? Can I go till 10 minutes?
Yeah. You can take.
See, it's 4:45. 4:55. If I finish, it's okay.
Yeah, you can take even more. No problem.
Okay. If the audience wants, I can give more. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, but if whenever you want, if you have any question, you feel free to stop it. Okay. So let me recall. So for any n cross n matrix and lambda partition of A, recall this F. So here I'm sorry, the notation is getting cumbersome. F lambda AX is the immanential polynomial of xi minus a. Yeah. Immanential polynomial, which is immanent of xi minus a, which is the immanential polynomial of the matrix A with respect to the irreducible character lambda. So F1, as I've said, 1 power n, when lambda is 1 1 1 1, that is written as 1 power n somehow in this partition theory. F1 power n A is the characteristic polynomial. And now if you look at F, see, we need the coefficients. As I said, the coefficients, each coefficient up to sign will be monotonic. This is what I said in the introductory lecture. So I want to, in the introductory slide, not the introductory lecture, I'm sorry, introductory slide. So I want to say something similar. So I'm going to write down the expression. So I'm sorry, this looks kind of ugly. This equation 1 looks kind of ugly. But wait, there will be one more equation which looks even more ugly when the Q comes. Yeah. So if you think this is bad, wait. That time I will say sorry at that time. This itself looks bad, but it's just because there are several things that are required to define it. You need the matrix LT because there is a tree T that defines a matrix LT. You need a partition lambda, so the tree has n vertices, so LT will be an n cross n matrix. You need a function from Sn to Z indexed by lambda, which is the irreducible character indexed by lambda. So now you get this. So I have written it in this standard manner because this is how we write characteristic polynomial, minus 1 to the r, x to the n minus r, and there is some coefficient. So this coefficient is dependent on the matrix LT, the function, the lambda and the r here. Yeah, is this clear? The equation 1. There are just 3 parameters required to index a coefficient here. Yeah. So these are the coefficients of the Laplacian immanential polynomial in absolute value. The sign I'm going to ignore. Yeah.
Sir, this LT is Laplacian or Q Laplacian?
For the moment it's just Laplacian. I have not yet gone to the Q Laplacian.
Okay.
So I've just gone to Laplacian. I will define a few results which are known about Laplacian polynomials of LT. That itself, there are Laplacian immanential polynomials itself are known, not just the Q Laplacian. So I want to define a little more background and then I will go to my result.
Okay, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? If anybody wants to stop me, Okay. So let me say a few things about known results. So these immanential polynomials were studied by Meris, who is the author of the book on the left that you saw, the red colored book, Russell Meris. And he showed that the immanential polynomials corresponding to the partition, this 2 1 1 1 1. So 1 will occur n minus 2 times. That has connections. This immanential polynomial has connections to the centroid of T. Centroid, it's one of the measures of centrality. So there are several measures of centrality of the tree T. This is one of them. Yeah. And when lambda equal to 1 power n, that is the determinant, which is, so lambda 1 power n will give you the sign, so it will give you the determinant. So the Gutmann and Pavlovich conjectured, and it was later proved by Gutmann-Zhao and independently by Mohr, this following property. This is what we said. This is the first property that is mentioned. So, on the first slide there were 5 properties. One of the 5 properties is this: coefficients of the Laplacian polynomial of a tree. Take any tree T, it lies between the path. So Pn is the path on n vertices, Sn is the star on n vertices. This coefficient for the of the Laplacian matrix of T lies between corresponding coefficients for the star and the path. Yeah, this is known. And Chan, Lam, and Liu, I don't know. This paper is there on arXiv, but this has not been. This has not appeared in a journal, even though this is old enough. It is from 2003, and it's correct. It's not as if the paper has a mistake. If there's a mistake, then of course, you can't say anything. But even though it's there in preprint, so I don't know why it's not appeared in print. If it's there on arXiv, the authors definitely want to be disseminated to a wider audience. But I don't know how come. I don't know what is the reason. Yeah. And I don't know where they are. I've tried searching for these people. I don't know. They were in Singapore. Now, if you look at the affiliation given in that preprint, they are not there in the university, in US. They are not there. So I don't know where they are. I have no idea. So a similar result is true for just like for any arbitrary lambda. Yeah, this is what is known already. So now I'm going to introduce the Q analog of T Laplacian of the Laplacian of T. So again, as I said, that notation was horrible. This notation is even more horrible because now you get this extra Q also. So I have a tree T, and now I have this Q extra. So here same thing. So now this coefficient is going to be a polynomial in Q. The C lambda R L Q T of Q. So this coefficient, if you look at this is a bivariate polynomial. This d lambda of xi minus LQT, because LQT itself has entries which are polynomials in the variable Q. X is a fresh polynomial. X is a fresh variable, an independent variable. So if you look at this d lambda of xi minus LQT, it's going to be a bivariate polynomial. And if you look at the coefficient of x power n minus r, that's going to be a polynomial in the variable Q. And I'm going to plug the minus 1 power r. This is just to adhere to the standard convention. So now the coefficient of x to the n minus r happens to be a polynomial in the variable Q. It won't be a number. Earlier, if you look at just LQ, if LQ was just the matrix L, which had integer entries, this coefficient will be again some integer. Now this coefficient is going to be a polynomial in the variable Q. Yeah, is it clear? So now earlier we could say one number, this coefficient was smaller than some other coefficient, this coefficient was larger than another coefficient. Now how do we say one polynomial is bigger than another polynomial? How do we say one polynomial is smaller than another polynomial? Here is this thing. So I have similar thing. So look at the polynomial for the coefficient of x power n minus r, that is actually this LQT. And if you look at it, the corresponding polynomial in LQSN, you look at the difference of these two polynomials. So term by term, this is a polynomial in r plus q. That means if you look at the coefficient of q squared in, so let's say this I'm taking difference between these two. That is, if I want to say the star is the minimum, LQT and LQSN. If you look at the rth polynomial, this minus this first term, this is a polynomial. This first term is a polynomial. I'm sorry, that it shouldn't have happened. This first term is a polynomial. Second term is another polynomial. The difference between these two polynomials has only positive coefficients. That means we'll say one polynomial is bigger than another polynomial. Is this clear? We'll say this polynomial is two polynomials, f1 of q and f2 of q. f1 of q is bigger than f2 of q if f1 of q minus f2 of q is a polynomial with non-negative coefficients. Non-negative. Yeah, r plus, so only those which are positive I'll write, the zeros I don't have to write. Is this clear? This is a standard way to prove, if you look at FKG inequalities, there is this FKG inequalities on posets. There are Q analogs by Bjorner. He does exactly this. This is a standard definition to extend inequality results for constants to inequality results for polynomials. Yeah? Okay. So, and if you recall, this was a theorem that Chan, Lam and all proved, that if you look at LT, the coefficient corresponding to x power n minus r up to sign, this is the middle term. The middle term here is the coefficient in the characteristic polynomial of LT corresponding to coefficient x power n minus r up to sign. So that was in between these two. Yeah. So we get something similar. So let me write it down. This is my theorem. This is a result. Mukesh and I had this. It's there. It was proved in 2019. It's there on my homepage, the paper. If anybody wants, you can't download something, you let me know. We'll see to it that you get the paper. Yeah. It's there on my homepage. So this says exactly this. So here, you see, the point is you have two trees now, T1 and T2, where T2 covers T1. That is, T2 is above T1 on the poset GTSN. So here I'm going to bring in the poset GTSN as well. Okay. So what I want to say is, if you take the immanental polynomial of the Q analog of the Laplacian of T1, now you see, now you just don't have the Q analog of one matrix LQT. now you're going along the GTSN poset. So as you go up, what I want to say is, if you look at, so let's say T1 and T2 are two trees on the GTS poset where T2 covers. So covers is just a standard terminology in Hasse diagram, in poset theory. That means T2 is just above T1. Yeah. T2 is just above T1. So then if you look at T2 minus T1 is the polynomial corresponding to T1 is bigger than the polynomial corresponding to T2, term by term. That's what it means here. So for every, you fix the R, which means x power n minus, you look at the immanential polynomial for T1 with respect to lambda, you look at the immanential polynomial of T2 with respect to lambda. So your lambda is a, so here the theorem is general because it says for any lambda, any partition lambda of n and any two trees such that T2 is above T1 in the GTSN poset, there is this interesting property. That if you look at the immanential polynomial of T1 with respect to lambda, you will get this. This is the expression. If you look at the immanential polynomial of T2 with respect to lambda, you will get this expression. And these two are, so if you look at this coefficients, these two are polynomials in the variable lambda. Their difference is a polynomial which is in R plus of, in fact, not Q, Q squared. We assert this. So this is the theorem. Yeah. So I mean, proof involves some. Is this statement clear? So our theorem just says that as you go up along the GTSN poset, which is the first poset, the poset we started out with, then as you go up, not just characteristic polynomial, immanential polynomials also, the coefficients are of the Q analog of the Laplacian also, they are monotonic. That is, if you look at T1 minus T2, that is it's bottom heavy, that is bottom part of the poset. As it goes towards the top, the coefficients will just get smaller and smaller. Maybe I could have given some examples to illustrate. Yeah. So the proof involves some vertex orientations and putting some statistic on orientations. Yeah. So it essentially you can ignore this. This. Okay. So we get some results. So we get more refined results than whatever was known. Whatever I presented in the introduction, this Gutmann, Zhao, and Mohr. So they just said that the minimum is, the extreme points are path and the star. They said that we get something more refined, because we show monotonicity. Gutmann and Zhao and Mohr, their result was proved before this GTS poset came. So they somehow proved it, by hook or crook. But here now we have a more refined proof. That is, we show monotonicity along the GTSN poset. And so you get, even the Chan, Lam and Yo. Because if you look at one of the coefficients of the characteristic polynomial, you'll get the immanent because it corresponds to the last thing. See, the determinant will appear in the characteristic, polynomial as the last term, that is the constant term. Likewise, the immanent will appear in the immanential polynomial as the constant term. So that gives you some results about the immanential, whatever was proved by Chan, Lam and Yo, that also you get. And you get some Q squared analog of vertex moments. So see, this is one thing. I have not pursued this line. It is there. One of the sections of our paper is on this. Now I don't remember the section number, but this is one area which I would like to pursue. Which you can get the usual centroid. The centroid can be obtained. This uses whatever I said about Meris's result. The second immanent has connections to the centroid. So now because of this, you can define a Q squared analog of centroid. And then you can get some extra information. So you can get whatever Meris gets. You can get a little more. This is what we get. So now, can we get anything more? So in earlier work with Bapat, I had defined. So now I'm overshooting time. Is it okay, or I can stop here because what else is just extra?
It's okay. You can take some more time.
Is it okay? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Because now this is all extra. Yeah. The main what I wanted to say is there. Mainly now you can get a little more. What our paper addresses this as well, and this is an extra thing. Yeah. So in earlier work with Bapat, so we had defined this QT Laplacian of a tree T as follows. So you take a tree. Now you take every edge. So this is the star tree with central vertex 1. Now you arbitrarily change every edge to two bidirected arcs, one in each direction. Along one you label it as T, along the other you label it as Q. Yeah, in whatever manner you want. Which is to be labeled T, I don't know. I leave the choice to you. But if you label I to J as T, the reverse J to I has to be labeled as Q, or the other way around. So you have one choice. Once you choose T, Q gets fixed. Yeah. So is this clear? So now you get a QT analog of the Laplacian. Yeah. So this is very much similar to the Q analog of the Laplacian. If you put Q equal to T, you will get the Q analog of the Laplacian. But if you put here, you get a bivariate version of the Laplacian. Yeah. The LQT. This also was motivated by some study that we had done on zeta functions of graphs. So now you get this new Laplacian. It's a bivariate Laplacian, Qt. Yeah. So in this you get this bivariate version of a Laplacian. It depends on two parameters q and t, and the q and t can be arbitrary. Yeah. Okay. So when q and t are in R with qt greater than 0, our main result, this theorem of ours goes to. Because see, our point is, you see, this polynomial is a polynomial in R plus of q squared. Yeah. So exactly the same thing goes through. Instead of q squared, you get qt. Yeah. And now if you put one, no matter what value of q you put, you're going to get this minus this difference is a polynomial, and it is going to have positive coefficients because for all q. So essentially what this theorem says is, you get some, as q varies also, you will get, for all values of q in R, you get monotonicity properties. You fix the value of q, then you get a Laplacian. For that value of q, there is monotonicity. That's what this says. And now you can change, see, because you get this q, this difference polynomial is a polynomial in R plus of q squared. Now the difference polynomial here will be a polynomial in R plus of qt. So if qt is bigger than 0, the same result goes through. Yeah. So as a result, no, here you can definitely set, you know, you don't have to have the Laplacian. You can have some, you know, funny matrices which are Laplacian type. They look like the Laplacian, but all I care is now q and t. Qt has to be greater than 0. So I could put, you know, signed Laplacian. I could put one thing. Only thing, q and t have the same sign. It need not be the same value. So that is, for example, I could put 1 and 2, q equal to 1, t equal to 2. If I put that, you look at this, this is like the q analog of the Laplacian. So, you know, it just breaks the symmetry somehow. You get an asymmetric matrix, the non-symmetric matrix. There also you get some interesting properties about the coefficients of the Laplacian, this q Laplacian. Yeah, that's what we get. And now further, if you look at where do we need R, that also we don't need. So if qt are in C, as long as qt is bigger than 0, our main result goes through. So here, here there's a typo, I'm really sorry, corollary 1 has to be z and 1 has to be z bar. Yeah? Q equal to z and t equal to z in this thing is wrong, I'm really sorry. One has to be z and the other has to be z bar. Then of course qt will be z bar, which will be greater than 0. Yeah, I'm really sorry, there's a typo here. Yeah, actually I'll correct this, and so there are two corrections I will make. I'll make them and send them to Rajesh. Yeah, today. So if for example you said q equal to I, this is since I'm using Aij, I'm scared to use the I here again. Yeah, just for so that it may confuse you with some other thing. I've indexed some couple of entries with Aij. So the iota I'm going to use this thing here represents, you know, square root of -1. Yeah, and t equal to minus essentially z bar. So I'm still setting z and z bar. You get some funny matrix, and actually these are actually studied. This is called Hermitian adjacency matrix. The first defined by Bapat, Pati, and Kalita. Are they there? Bapat, Pati, and Kalita. If any of them are there, you know, their work. Yeah, they started this thing, and later somebody independently, Liu and Lee, and independently Go and Mohar. You know, independently 3 set of people. Though if you look at the chronological order, Bapat, Pati, and Lal are the first people to do it. They define what is called the Hermitian adjacency matrix. So you take the adjacency matrix, instead of it being symmetric. So adjacency matrix. What is the adjacency matrix? You have if Ij is an edge of the graph, Aij is 1, Aji is 1. Now you put Aij is some iota, which is the complex square root of -1. Aji you put as minus iota. How do you choose which is I, which is minus I? It doesn't matter actually. Yeah. So they with that definition you get some results. You know, this is the Hermitian adjacency matrix. You get some results. You can use that to define the Hermitian Laplacian matrix that was defined by U and Q. I don't know how you say it, but U and Q. Yeah, and they get, you know, Hermitian Laplacian matrix. So and now we on these matrices our results are applicable. Our earlier results, because all we care is qt is to be greater than or equal to 0. That's all. Yeah. It earlier in terms of q squared, you just need qt to be greater than 0. So that's it. So we get some more information here. Yeah. So yeah. So what Bapat, Lal, and Pati they did is they showed the exponential distance matrix of a tree. This inverse is the okay. So these maybe I can ignore this for the moment. I'll just tell you one other amazing result of Meris. So this is jointly with Meris and Watkins. So this guy Meris, no, he has amazing results, no? And somehow, you know, this can be taught in a course, but I don't see them being taught in a course, you know. So my aim is to try to popularize Meris's works, because the results are so beautiful, so elegant, and it requires some background representation theory, which is not hard actually. No, one can study them easily in a course, and then, you know, there are beautiful results. For example, this result of Meris, no. So if you look at, if A is an invertible matrix, no, so determinant of A inverse, but d lambda of A. Yeah, so d lambda is the immanent of A corresponding to the partition lambda. D lambda of A into determinant of A inverse equal to d lambda of A inverse into determinant of A. This happens when lambda is a partition of n which has only two columns. That is, it is of the form 2 power k 1 power n minus 2k. Okay. So using this, because we have some results for the determinant immanental polynomial, you can get some results for A inverse, for two column partitions. So yeah, that's the last I wanted to say. So using these are all general results known for immanents. There's nothing special about Laplacian. So using some results like this, we can get results on coefficient of immanental polynomials for LQ inverse. LQ inverse also known, that's also studied, and you can get some extra results. Yeah. So with that, maybe I think I will stop. Yeah. So maybe how do I unshare the one minute?
Okay, so let's thank Professor Krishnan for his talk, interesting talk.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, any questions? Yeah, feel free to let me know. And if you felt this I could explain this better, let me know, because then I can I can add more detail for this talk and try the next time at least I can hope to. Like Newton-Raphson, next iteration maybe I can be closer to a better. Yeah. No, it will help me. Feedback is definitely going to help me.
Yeah.
So I don't know how do I get the window. I close this, but wait. Now can people see me or? No,
not yet.
No, camera. 1 minute. I don't know what I did. You are presenting. Stop presenting. Now?
Yeah. So.
Yeah. Okay. I just said stop presenting. Okay. Yeah. So any questions? I'm. Yeah. So I think I made two mistakes in there. There were two typos. I'll correct them and I'll send them by tonight to Rajesh. Yeah.
Sure.
For the.
Hello, sir.
Yeah.
Like with characters of irreducible representation of Sn, right?
Yeah.
And so we use some properties of characters especially, or we can work with arbitrary class functions of Sn.
You can work with arbitrary class functions. See, characters they form a basis for the space of class functions. So if you study for arbitrary class function,
write the linear span.
Yeah, so you can write it as a linear combination, and because of multilinearity of this immanent. So there are properties. The determinant is alternating multilinear, and there's a standardization. Yeah, normal meaning, but identity matrix is one. Arbitrary immanents are not alternating; they are multilinear. But that's why the book is called multilinear algebra. If you look at the book of Meris, it's called multilinear algebra. But it's not alternating. That is, if you have two columns or two rows are identical, then the immanent will not be zero. In fact, if you look at the matrix with all ones, J, n cross n, permanent of that is, which is an immanent, permanent will be n factorial, which is not zero. So that will go, but you can write it as using multilinearity for arbitrary class functions. You can write it as a linear combination of characters and work with them.
Okay. For the Q Laplacian matrix, you have given expression in terms of identity matrix, degree matrix, and.
Correct. That's the definition. Yeah, that's the definition. Yeah, I mean.
That's the definition. Like that, is there a definition for this Qt Laplacian polynomial?
Correct. Exactly.
Qt.
Yeah. Qt also there is one word. Yeah.
But
let me. Yeah, Qt exactly. In fact, Qt it will just be. So let me go to the presentation. See, I didn't. I went fast. Maybe window. Which one? Is this coming? The paper, the presentation, is it coming back?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So Qt Laplacian. Yeah. So if you look at it, so you whenever if it is labeled t and q, you put minus t and minus q. You put 1 plus d minus I into Qt. So if you look at the q analog of the Laplacian, okay. 1 minute. So here you get I plus q square into d minus I minus qa, So now this a will have the minus q and the minus t, If the ijth entry is q, jth entry will be minus t. So this qa matrix is already taken care of by this. Minus q and minus t at the ijth and jith thing. Now instead of q squared, you put qt. I plus qt into d minus I minus this weighted adjacency matrix where you get minus q and minus t, depending on the label. That's the definition of the Qt Laplacian.
Okay, sir. Okay, thank you, sir.
Yeah. 1 minute. I'll change. I'll stop the presentation. Okay. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Yeah.
You have any other questions? Christian, for dit of LQ, you have given a formula,
Yeah.
1 minus q square.
That is for a tree,
For tree.
for an arbitrary, yeah, for a tree, yeah.
So what is the
Yeah.
analog for the bivariate case? For
It will be 1 minus qt.
1 minus qt. Oh, okay.
1 minus qt, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, this one, no, this determinant of LQ is 1 minus q squared, it will be 1 minus qt, that's it.
1 minus qt. Okay. Thank
Yeah,
you.
correct. Yeah. Let me stop presenting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, if you don't have any other question, let's thank the speaker again. Yeah, thank you, Christian, for the interesting
Yeah,
talk.
thanks, thanks. I'll send you the slide, yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. All right.
Okay,
All right.
bye-bye.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I'll upload I'll send you the slide by email, within some 2-3 hours.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, thank you. I will upload the talk
sure.
as well as the video as well as the
Yeah.
slide in the.
Video, yeah. Video is your property. Feel free, whatever you want.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bye.